1950. A university lecture hall in West Germany. The afternoon light slants through tall windows, casting long shadows across rows of young officer candidates. They sit with notebooks open, pens ready, faces earnest and unburdened by the weight of decisions not yet made. At the lectern stands General Friedrich Kohler, retired, 71 years old now, gray suit instead of uniform. The Knight's Cross he earned in another lifetime sits in a drawer at home. Unworn for a decade, he adjusts his reading glasses, looks at the assembled faces. So young, so certain that competence equals correctness, that skill guarantees right outcomes. He once believed the same. Gentlemen, Kohler begins, his voice carrying the measured authority of 4 decades in service. Today we discuss December 1941, the Soviet winter counteroffensive, the Standfast Order. Most military histories call it a turning point. They are correct, though not for the reasons they state. He pauses, lets the silence build. We're not here to study tactics, not to analyze operational maneuvers. We're here to examine what happens when expert military judgment confronts political will. When the code you've sworn to uphold demands you execute orders you believe are wrong. Another pause. Longer this time. I was there, Chief of the General Staff. I wrote the Standfast Order with my own hand, distributed it to 3 million men. It worked. The army survived December, and that success destroyed us more thoroughly than any defeat could have. He opens a leather-bound journal. The pages are yellowed, the ink faded. December 1941 entries, written by a younger version of himself who still believed technical excellence mattered more than political conviction. This is how it began. December 4th, 1941, 4:30 in the morning. The thermometer outside the commandeered schoolhouse reads minus 35 degrees Celsius. Inside, it's barely warmer. General Heinrich Steiner stands before a map table, his fingers wrapped in wool strips because proper winter gloves ran out 3 weeks ago. The map before him makes no sense. Red arrows everywhere. Soviet attacks. Dozens of them. All along his front. All at once. He's 53 years old. Commander of 2nd Panzer Army. The same formation that raced across France in 1940, that drove deep into Soviet territory these past 5 months. 600 tanks in June. Fewer than 50 operational now. Not destroyed in combat. Just frozen. Useless sculptures of German engineering excellence rendered impotent by Russian winter. An adjutant enters, frost crusting his eyebrows despite the short walk from the communications room. Sir, Kaluga sector reports Soviet breakthrough. Division strength. Fresh troops in winter uniforms. Steiner traces the red arrow with his wrapped finger. Kaluga. Then Tula. Then Yelets. Every position his panzers fought to reach now under assault. Fresh troops. Winter uniforms. The Soviets weren't supposed to have reserves left. He'd written to his wife 2 weeks ago. Confident words. The war essentially over. Home by Christmas. The letter probably reached her yesterday. She's reading it now. Believing him. He believed himself when he wrote it. Outside, the eastern sky lightens to gray. Dawn coming. The attacks began in darkness. Coordinated timing across hundreds of kilometers. Steiner looks at his staff officers, men he's commanded for 18 months. Good officers. They're looking back at him with the same question in their eyes. What do we do when the war we thought we'd won suddenly isn't over? 80 kilometers north, Field Marshal Wilhelm von Brenner receives the same reports in his Army Group Center headquarters. He's 61, old enough to remember when wars were fought according to established rules, young enough to see that era ending. Von Brenner comes from Prussian military aristocracy. His grandfather served under Moltke. His father commanded a corps in the First War. He absorbed the code with mother's milk. Duty. Honor. Honest counsel to superiors. That code is about to be tested in ways his grandfather never imagined. He picks up the telephone, calls Kohler at the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. The connection crackles with static. War has degraded everything. Even communication. The situation is serious. Von Brenner doesn't waste words. Soviet attacks all along the front. Fresh troops. We estimate 15 to 20 new divisions. Our forces are exhausted. Temperatures dropping. I'm not certain we can hold. On the other end, 700 kilometers away. Kohler writes in his diary, the leather-bound journal where he records the war's progress with meticulous detail. December 5th entry. Enemy launched counterattacks, almost entire front. Troops exhausted. Barely holding ground. Crisis arrived sooner than thought possible. Crisis. The word appears for the first time since the invasion began in June. 5 months of triumph. Encirclement. Breakthrough. Advance. Now, suddenly, Crisis. Kohler is 57, chief of the general staff. He planned this campaign, calculated the ratios, predicted the timeline. By every metric that mattered, the Soviets should have been finished. 4 million casualties since June, thousands of tanks destroyed, thousands of aircraft lost, entire armies encircled and eliminated. The numbers said victory. The numbers were wrong. Understanding requires context. Steiner made his reputation on speed. Panzer doctrine. Strike deep, move fast, exploit breakthrough, encircle enemy before they can react. It worked in Poland, worked spectacularly in France, worked initially in Russia, but speed requires fuel, requires functioning engines, requires roads not buried under snow, requires supply lines not stretched across partisan-infested territory for hundreds of kilometers. By December, Steiner has none of these things. He stands at his map, remembering June, the border crossing, 3,000 tanks advancing like a steel tide, Soviet forces crumbling, pocket after pocket created, hundreds of thousands captured, Smolensk in July, Kiev in September. By October, Moscow visible on the horizon, 20 kilometers away, close enough to see the Kremlin spires through binoculars on clear days, victory seemingly inevitable. Then the rains came. October mud that stopped everything. Tanks sinking to their turrets. Trucks immobilized. Artillery pieces disappearing into the soup of Russian roads. The Rasputitsa. They call it the season of mud. November brought the freeze. The ground hardened. Movement became possible again. The final push toward Moscow resumed. Surely this time, but November's freeze was merely practice for December's cold. Steiner looks at the thermometer again. Minus 35? And dropping. Kohler's profession is systematic thinking. At the Wolf's Lair, he maintains elaborate charts tracking every division, every regiment, every battalion on the Eastern Front. He knows the paper strength and the actual strength. The gap between them grows daily. On paper, Army Group Center musters over 1 million men. In reality, combat effectiveness perhaps half that. The rest are sick, wounded, frostbitten, or simply too exhausted to fight. Kohler calculated logistics before the invasion. Food, ammunition, fuel, replacement parts. The calculations assumed quick victory. 6 weeks maximum. Capture Moscow before winter. Soviet Union collapses. War in the East won by autumn. The calculations assumed no serious resistance. Assumed Soviet military incompetence. Assumed Stalin's purges had broken the Red Army beyond recovery. Every assumption catastrophically wrong. Kohler picks up the telephone again. This time calling Steiner directly. Wants first-hand assessment from the officer whose judgment he trusts most. Heinrich, what's your situation? Steiner's voice comes through thin with distance and fatigue. Friedrich, they hit us with everything. Fresh divisions we didn't know existed. Siberian troops, winter equipment, weapons that still function in this cold. My men can't fire their rifles. The bolts are frozen. Machine guns jam after 3 rounds. The panzers won't start. We're fighting with frozen equipment against an enemy who came prepared. Pause, then quieter. I need permission to withdraw. Current positions are indefensible. Let me pull back 50 kilometers. Shorten the line. Consolidate. Save what's left of the army. Kohler writes this down. Underlines it. He knows Steiner. If Steiner says positions are indefensible, they are indefensible. I'll present your request. He hangs up, looks at the map, the entire Eastern Front stretching from Arctic to Black Sea. 3 million German soldiers, the largest military operation in history. And now, in December, freezing in place while fresh Soviet divisions attack, Kohler has spent his life trusting systematic analysis, trusting technical competence. But the numbers failed to predict this. The analysis missed the Soviet capacity for regeneration. Excellence didn't account for an enemy who simply refuses to quit. For the first time in his career, Kohler questions whether pure military logic suffices. 500 kilometers east, a different headquarters, General Mikhail Volkonsky studies his own maps. Soviet maps, showing the same battlefield from the opposite perspective. He's 45, commander of the Western Front. The force defending Moscow, Volkonsky rose from peasant origins, joined the Red Army in 1918 as barely literate teenager, learned to read in military schools, rose through ranks on pure competence, survived Stalin's purges because he was fighting Japanese in Mongolia when the executions began. Pure luck. The only reason he's alive. Now he commands the defense of the Soviet capital against the most sophisticated army in the world. And he knows something the Germans don't. They're not facing the broken, incompetent force they expected. The purges did massive damage. Yes. Killed the best officers. Yes. But the survivors learned brutal lessons. Adapt or die. Competence or execution. The Red Army of December 1941 bears little resemblance to the one that began the war. Staff officers enter with reports from the night's attacks. Volkonsky's senior operations officer speaks first. Comrade General, the offensive proceeds as planned. German resistance strong but disorganized. Their positions show signs of frostbite epidemic. Equipment failures widespread. Volkonsky nods. Studies the map. He spent 2 months preparing this counteroffensive, not with revolutionary enthusiasm, not with communist ideology. With cold calculation, he husbanded reserves while Germans exhausted themselves attacking, brought Siberian divisions west by rail. Troops trained in winter warfare, equipped properly, felt boots, quilted jackets, white camouflage suits, weapons that function at minus 40 degrees. He waited for the German offensive to culminate, to reach the point where momentum dies. When attackers have shot their bolt and can't continue, then he struck. The Germans are skilled opponents. Volkonsky tells his staff, never forget that. Any other army would have collapsed already. Their discipline is remarkable. But discipline can't overcome frozen equipment and frostbitten men. Continue pressure. Coordinated attacks. Keep them reacting, not initiating. The officers disperse to transmit orders. Volkonsky stays at the map. He respects his enemy. That's how capable soldiers operate. You don't underestimate competent opponents. You study them. Learn their patterns. Exploit their weaknesses. The German weakness isn't lack of skill. It's lack of preparation for the environment they're fighting in. They planned for quick victory. Didn't plan for winter war. Now they're paying the price. But Volkonsky also knows Soviet limitations. His armies can attack now, while Germans are frozen and exhausted. But Soviet logistics are stretched too. Ammunition limited, that's fuel scarce if he pushes too far. His own offensive will collapse. This isn't about destroying the German army. That's impossible. This is about pushing them back, saving Moscow. Surviving. Surviving is victory enough. December 6th. The temperature drops to minus 37. Steiner's headquarters receives reports from frontline units. The accounts read like technical manuals on equipment failure. Panzer III engines cracking from thermal stress. The metal can't withstand the cold. Crews try lighting fires underneath to warm the engines. Sometimes it works. Usually just creates smoke and wastes precious fuel. Oil turning to sludge. Thick as tar. Won't flow. Won't lubricate. Engines can't turn over even if they don't crack. Artillery recoil systems freezing solid. The guns fire once. The recoil mechanism jams gun permanently out of action. Artillerymen reduced to single-shot weapons. Rifles worse. Bolt action mechanism seizing. Soldiers trying to force the bolts. Metal on metal in extreme cold. The bolts won't move. Can't chamber rounds. Can't fire. Machine guns completely useless. Lubricating oil frozen. Moving parts welded together by ice. After 3 rounds, permanent jam. Horses dying by thousands. The German army still relies heavily on horses for logistics. Hundreds of thousands of them. In this cold, they simply freeze standing. Fall dead in harness. Soldiers try to eat the meat immediately. But it freezes solid within minutes. Can't be cut. Can't be cooked. No fuel for fires anyway. Frostbite epidemic spreading faster than any disease. Men waking unable to move their fingers. Toes black inside boots. Ears frozen solid. Noses white and hard. The medical reports show numbers that stagger comprehension. December 5th. 15,000 frostbite cases. One day. 15,000 men permanently damaged or dead from cold alone. Not combat casualties. Weather casualties. Steiner reads these reports with the detachment learned over 30 years in service. But underneath, growing horror. This isn't war. This is nature eliminating human beings who had no business being here in December. He writes his request formally. Military precision. No emotion. Just facts. 2nd Panzer Army combat ineffective. 50% casualties from environmental factors. Equipment failure rate catastrophic. Current positions militarily indefensible. Request permission withdraw to prepared defensive line 50 kilometers west. This would consolidate forces, shorten supply lines, preserve combat capability for renewed operations spring 1942. He signs it, sends it up the chain of command. To von Brenner, who will forward to Kohler, who will present to the Chancellor. Officers following proper procedures. Honest assessment going to higher authority. the system working as designed. Steiner believes the request will be approved. The military logic is irrefutable. He's about to learn that military logic has competitors. The reports reach Kohler's desk by evening of December 6th. Not just from Steiner. From every Army Group commander on the Eastern Front, all saying the same thing. Troops exhausted, equipment failing, positions untenable, request permission to withdraw. Kohler reads them all, makes notes, calculates. If he authorizes withdrawal across the entire front, they'll shorten the line by 200 kilometers, reduce the number of divisions needed to hold, free up reserves, establish defensible winter positions. Standard military doctrine. Nothing radical, just sound judgment applied to operational reality. He walks to the map room, studies the Eastern Front displayed on the wall, the blue arrows showing German advances, deeper into Soviet territory than Napoleon ever reached, deeper than any European army in history, and now, maybe too deep, extended beyond sustainable limits. Kohler has the authority to authorize tactical withdrawals. That's what this is. Tactical, not strategic retreat, just local adjustments to improve defensive positions. But he knows this decision transcends tactics. He picks up the telephone, calls the Chancellor's office. Request meeting. Granted immediately. The Chancellor is 52 years old, former corporal in the First War. Political revolutionary, self-taught strategist. No formal military education. No staff training. No experience commanding anything larger than a regiment. And yet, he's made decisions that officers said were impossible, and been proven right. France 1940. Ardennes offensive. Every general said it wouldn't work. The Chancellor insisted. It worked spectacularly. Initial invasion of Soviet Union. Generals wanted to focus on Moscow. Chancellor insisted on Kiev encirclement first. The generals doubted. The encirclement netted 665,000 prisoners. So when the Chancellor makes strategic decisions based on intuition rather than staff analysis, he has track record to support his confidence. Kohler enters the office, carries the withdrawal requests, lays them on the desk. The situation is critical. Soviet counteroffensive gaining momentum. Our force is at the limit of endurance. Every Army Group commander requests permission for tactical withdrawal. Shorten the line. Consolidate. Prepare for spring operations. The Chancellor reads the requests slowly, then looks up. What happens if we withdraw? Kohler prepared for this question. We preserve the army, establish defensible positions, save equipment that would otherwise be abandoned, reduce casualties, position ourselves for a renewed offensive in spring. And what do we abandon? Territory, perhaps 200 kilometers. Ground we captured this autumn. The Chancellor shakes his head. Nothing is insignificant when Moscow is 20 kilometers away. We retreat now. We signal weakness. We tell the Soviets they can push us. We tell our own troops that the advance is over. The psychological impact would be catastrophic. Kohler tries again. Technical assessment versus political consideration. The psychological impact of continued casualties in indefensible positions will be worse. Napoleon retreated from Moscow in 1812. His retreat became rout. His army dissolved in the snow, the same cold. The Russian winter destroyed him not because he fought it, but because he ran from it. Napoleon's army wasn't the Wehrmacht. Our discipline is superior. Controlled withdrawal is possible. Possible, but is it necessary? Can our troops hold if ordered to stand? Kohler pauses. Honest answer. Unknown. Possibly. At enormous cost. The cost of holding may exceed the cost of withdrawal, or the cost of holding may be the price of eventual victory. We don't know. But I know this. Retreat is certain defeat of will. Standing fast has chance of success. The Chancellor stands, walks to his own map, studies it. I will not authorize retreat. The army will stand fast. Hold current positions. Any commander who authorizes withdrawal will be relieved of command. Is that clear? Perfectly clear. Kohler returns to his office. Opens his diary. December 6th entry. Request for withdrawal denied. Army ordered to stand fast. Technical military judgment overruled by strategic calculation. Cannot predict outcome. Can only execute orders. He picks up the telephone, begins making calls to von Brenner, to Steiner, to every Army Group commander. The stand-fast order is coming December 7th, minus 40 degrees. The cold has reached levels that defy description. Human bodies were not designed for this. German soldiers, wearing summer uniforms with perhaps a greatcoat, face temperatures that kill exposed skin in minutes. At Steiner's headquarters, a young lieutenant arrives from the front, walking wounded. He has frostbite on both hands. 3 fingers on his right hand will require amputation. but he walked 30 kilometers to deliver his report personally because radio communications have failed. The lieutenant stands before Steiner, tries to salute, can't raise his damaged hand properly, gives up. Sir, 3rd Battalion holding the Tula Road. We've lost 40 men in 2 days. Not from combat. From cold. They freeze in their foxholes overnight. We find them in the morning, still holding their rifles, still at their posts. Dead. Steiner listens, writes notes. Documentation of catastrophe. Ammunition. Adequate, but the weapons won't fire. Bolts frozen. Machine guns jammed. We're fighting with grenades and entrenching tools when the Soviets attack. Rations. Frozen solid. The bread breaks teeth. The canned meat is solid ice. We can't light fires. No wood. Everything combustible already burned. Morale? The lieutenant pauses. Thinks, gives honest answer. Sir, the men will hold because they're German soldiers and that's what we do. But they don't understand why we're holding positions that have no military value. Why we're dying for frozen ground we'll probably abandon in spring anyway. Steiner dismisses the lieutenant, sends him to the medical station for treatment. Knows the young officer will lose those fingers, will wear the scars of this decision for the rest of his life. Then Steiner receives the telephone call from von Brenner. Heinrich, the withdrawal request is denied. The Chancellor has ordered all forces to stand fast, hold current positions. No retreat authorized. I'm sorry. Steiner says nothing for a long moment. Then, Wilhelm, those positions are indefensible. I know. I argued that point. It didn't matter. The decision is made. Then we'll hold them until we can't. And men will die who didn't have to, for ground that has no value. That's correct. But those are our orders. Execute them as skillfully as we can. That's all we can do. The line goes dead. Steiner looks at his staff, officers who trust his judgment, who followed him across France, across Russia, who believe competence matters more than politics. Now he has to tell them that competence doesn't matter. Orders matter, even impossible orders. Gentlemen, we've received our instructions. We stand fast. No withdrawal. Hold all current positions. Begin preparations for sustained defensive operations in current locations. His staff exchanges glances. Nobody speaks. Nobody questions. They know how this works. But Steiner sees it in their eyes. The thing that breaks his heart, they trusted that the system valued sound judgment, that honest military assessment would guide decisions, that excellence mattered. They're learning it doesn't. The Prussian tradition, the code that valued truth over comfort, honest counsel over pleasing superiors, is dying in this frozen Russian winter. Not dying because of Soviet attacks. Dying because skilled officers are executing orders they know are wrong and calling it duty. Steiner dismisses his staff, sits alone at his desk, writes in his personal journal, not the official war diary. His private thoughts, December 7th, ordered to hold indefensible positions. Will execute orders skillfully despite disagreement. This is what we do. But I wonder if technical excellence in service of wrong decisions makes one complicit in those decisions. Wonder if I should resign rather than execute this order. But our culture says stay, mitigate damage from inside. That's what I'll do. Hope it's the right choice. Fear it isn't. He closes the journal, returns to the map, begins planning how to hold the unholdable. Because that's what officers do when politics overrides military judgment. They salute and execute, and the precedent being set this frozen December will echo through every subsequent disaster until the Reich itself falls in ruins. But that's 3.5 years away. Right now, in December 1941, General Heinrich Steiner just knows his men are going to freeze to death following orders that make no military sense. And he's going to help them do it. Skillfully, the temperature drops to minus 42 degrees. The standfast order is about to be formalized, and the army that conquered Europe is about to learn that technical competence serves any master, even the wrong one. December 5th, 1941. The Wolf's Lair, East Prussia. 10 days have passed since the Soviet counteroffensive began. 10 days of continuous combat in temperatures that hover between minus 35 and minus 45 degrees. 10 days of casualty reports that read like chronicles of a medieval plague. The withdrawal requests haven't stopped. They've multiplied. Now every corps commander, every division commander, every officer with authority to assess tactical reality is requesting the same thing. Permission to pull back, consolidate, shorten the lines, save what remains. The expert military judgment is unanimous. The current situation is unsustainable. Kohler has compiled the request into a formal briefing document 30 pages. Charts showing casualty rates, equipment losses, supply line failures, frostbite statistics. Every metric screaming the same message: withdrawal is militarily necessary. He carries this document into the conference room where the Chancellor waits with von Brenner and Steiner, both field commanders summoned from the front, both looking older than they did a month ago. The Eastern Front ages men faster than time alone can measure. The Chancellor sits at the head of the table. He hasn't slept properly in a week. The pressure shows in his face, but his eyes remain sharp, focused. He's made impossible decisions before. This is one more. Kohler lays out the briefing. Facts without emotion. Casualties since December 5th, 85,000. Projected through February, 350,000. Equipment losses, catastrophic. Tank availability down 70%. Artillery down 50%. Transport down 60%. Frostbite cases exceeding combat wounded 3-1. He pauses, lets the numbers sink in. Current positions stretch across 1,100 kilometers of front. We lack sufficient forces to hold that distance against sustained pressure. Soviet attacks coordinated, well-equipped for winter operations. Our forces are neither, von Brenner adds his assessment, measured tone, 40 years of service in his voice. The Prussian military tradition values two things above all: honest counsel to superiors, and mission-type orders that allow commanders flexibility to achieve objectives through their own judgment. I'm providing honest counsel now. Tactical withdrawal to prepared positions would preserve the army, allow us to fight effectively come spring. Current dispositions guarantee continued bleeding without strategic gain. Steiner speaks last, more direct. The panzer commander's way. My army is dying. Not fighting and dying. Just dying. Freezing in place. We're losing a regiment's worth of combat power every day to the weather. Not the enemy. The weather. Let me pull back 50 kilometers. Give my men shelter. Regroup. We'll be more effective in better positions than we are freezing in these. The Chancellor listens, doesn't interrupt. When all three finish, he's silent for a long moment. Then he stands, walks to the map, studies it with the intensity he brings to everything. I understand your assessments. I respect the judgment behind them. But you're looking at this as a military problem? It's not only military. It's psychological, political, existential. He turns to face them. You see withdrawal as tactical adjustment. I see it as admission of defeat. We came within 20 kilometers of Moscow. The Kremlin was visible through binoculars. We retreat now. We tell the world we failed. We tell our soldiers the advance is over. We tell the Soviets they can push us. Kohler opens his mouth. The Chancellor raises a hand. Let me finish. Napoleon retreated from Moscow in 1812. Same ground, same winter. His retreat became chaos. Discipline collapsed. His grand army dissolved, not because the Russians destroyed it, because retreat in extreme conditions becomes rout. Men abandon equipment to move faster. Units fragment. Order breaks down. Our discipline is superior to Napoleon's. Von Brenner says quietly, perhaps, but why test that assumption when we have an alternative? What alternative? Steiner asks. We can't attack. We can barely defend. We can hold. German soldiers have held impossible positions before. Verdun, the Somme, Ypres, held not because positions were defensible by military logic, held because German discipline doesn't break. The Chancellor returns to the table, sits, looks at each man in turn. I'm asking a simple question. Can your troops hold current positions if ordered to stand fast? Not comfortably. Not without casualties. Just hold. Yes or no? Kohler answers first. Unknown. Possibly at extreme cost? Von Brenner. Holding is possible, but the cost may exceed the benefit. Steiner hesitates, then gives the honest answer his code demands. My men will hold because they're German soldiers and that's what we do. Whether they should hold is a different question. The Chancellor nods. Then we have our answer. Holding is possible. Therefore we hold, not because it's comfortable, not because it's cheap, because retreat is certain defeat and holding has a chance. A chance of what? Kohler asks carefully. The Soviets aren't going to stop attacking. A chance that their offensive exhausts itself. That their supply lines stretch as far as ours. That winter affects them too. A chance that we survive December and can plan for spring. Retreat guarantees we're reacting to their initiative. Standing fast maintains our positions. Our dignity, our will. The room falls silent. These are intelligent men. They understand the Chancellor's logic has internal consistency. The question is whether that logic matches reality. Steiner tries once more. The cost in men will be staggering. The cost of losing is more staggering. We're not just fighting for territory. We're fighting to prove that will can overcome circumstances, that German determination can defeat Russian winter. That's the real battle. If we retreat, we admit that battle is lost. Von Brenner's voice carries the weight of 4 decades. This is not how the Prussian staff system works. Military judgment should guide. The Prussian staff system lost the First War. The Chancellor interrupts. Not harshly, just stating fact. Military judgment said we'd win in 1914. We didn't. It said France couldn't be defeated through the Ardennes in 1940. I overruled that judgment. We won in 6 weeks. It said the Soviet Union would collapse in 2 months. That judgment was wrong. He pauses. Softer now. I'm not dismissing your expertise. I'm saying military expertise is one factor among many. Politics matter. Psychology matters. Will matters. And my judgment is that standing fast serves those factors better than retreating does. Another silence. Longer this time. Kohler feels the moment crystallizing. The culture that valued truth over comfort, honest assessment over pleasing superiors, is being subordinated to strategic calculation, not through malice, through different evaluation of what matters. The Chancellor believes will overcome circumstances. The officers believe circumstances constrain will. Both positions have internal logic, but only one man makes the decision. Gentlemen, the Chancellor says, the order will be formalized tomorrow. No retreat, no withdrawal. Stand fast. Hold all current positions regardless of circumstances. Any commander who authorizes retreat will be relieved of command. That's final. He stands. The meeting is over. As they file out, Kohler catches von Brenner's eye. The old field marshal's face shows nothing, but Kohler knows that look. It's the look of a soldier who just received orders he knows are questionable and has to execute them anyway, because that's what soldiers do. They salute and execute, even when they know better. December 16th, Kohler's office. The order must be written. Formal, clear, unmistakable. Distributed to every unit on the Eastern Front, from Arctic Circle to Black Sea. 3 million men receiving the same instruction. Stand fast. Kohler sits at his desk with blank paper before him. His hand holds the pen, but he doesn't write immediately. This is the moment, the point where sound judgment becomes complicity in questionable decision. He can write this order clearly, making it as implementable as possible. Or he can resign in protest, refuse to participate in what he believes is doubtful. The code says stay. Mitigate damage from inside. Resigning abandons the soldiers who will have to execute this. Better to help them do it as skillfully as possible. But the code also says speak truth to power. He spoke truth. It was rejected. Now he's being asked to implement decision he argued against. Is that duty, or is it complicity? Kohler doesn't know. He's 57 years old. 40 years in service. This is the first time he genuinely doesn't know the right answer. So he does what he's always done, the thing he was trained to do. He writes the order. Operational order, no. 39. From High Command of the Army. To all Eastern Front formations. Subject. Defensive operations. Winter 1941-40. The current defensive line will be held. No withdrawals are authorized without explicit permission from this headquarters. All positions currently occupied will be defended to the last man. Commanders at all levels are responsible for holding their assigned sectors. Any commander who authorizes retreat without permission will be immediately relieved of command and subject to court-martial. The Führer has complete confidence in the German soldiers' ability to hold against any attack. This confidence is justified by our troops' proven discipline and courage. Winter conditions affect the enemy as much as ourselves. By standing fast, we maintain our positions and our honor. By spring, we will resume the offensive. Signed, General Friedrich Kohler, Chief of General Staff. He reads it twice. Clearly crafted, clear instructions, implementable despite the circumstances. He signs it. His signature commits 3 million men to freezing in place. Then he opens his diary. Private thoughts, not for official record. December 16th. Wrote stand fast order, despite believing it strategically questionable. Duty required me to make it implementable. But in making it implementable, I legitimized it. My skill now serves decision I opposed. Is this integrity or is this something else? Cannot answer. Can only execute. He closes the diary, sends the order to communications. Within hours, it will reach every headquarters, every command post. Every frozen foxhole on the Eastern Front, the order that will save the army in December and destroy it by 1945. But Kohler doesn't know that yet. He only knows he just used his technical skill to serve a decision he thinks is questionable. The precedent is set. The order reaches Steiner's headquarters at 1800 hours. Full dark. Temperature minus 43 degrees. Steiner reads it with his staff. Nobody speaks immediately. They're all thinking the same thing. We argued against this. We lost. Now we execute. Steiner's operations officer finally breaks the silence. How do we implement this? Sir, we're stretched across 200 kilometers. Don't have the forces to hold if Soviets concentrate against us. Sound question. Deserves sound answer. We hold the key positions. Create strong points. Mobile reserve to counterattack penetrations. Make the Soviets pay for every meter. Discipline and determination compensate for lack of numbers. Even as he says it, Steiner knows it's theory. Reality will be German soldiers freezing in exposed positions while Soviet winter-equipped troops attack with weapons that actually fire. But theory is all he has now. Issue the order to all subordinate commands. Exact text, no interpretation. Make clear this comes from highest level. Not my decision. I'm implementing it as skillfully as possible. The staff disperses. Steiner sits alone. He thinks about the soldier with frostbitten hands who walked 30 kilometers to report his battalion's situation. Thinks about the men freezing in foxholes. About the lieutenant who'll lose 3 fingers because of conditions nobody prepared for. Those men are going to die following this order. Not because the order makes military sense, because politics trumped military judgment and soldiers are executing what politics demands. Steiner picks up his personal journal. Writes, December 16th. Receive standfast order. Will execute skillfully despite disagreement. This is what we do. Men will die. I will help them die skillfully. This is duty. Hope it's right. Fear it isn't. He closes the journal, returns to the operational maps. Doing his duty. Serving catastrophe with skill. December 18th. Von Brenner's headquarters. The Soviet offensive hasn't slackened. If anything, it's intensified. Volkonsky is maintaining pressure. Probing for weak points. Pushing wherever German forces show signs of cracking. Von Brenner studies the tactical maps. Red arrows everywhere. His forces holding but bending. Casualties mounting. Exactly as predicted. His chief of staff enters. Sir. Ninth Army reports Soviet breakthrough at Rzhev. Regimental strength. Request permission to withdraw to secondary positions. Von Brenner reads the report. Militarily. The request makes perfect sense. Secondary positions are better prepared. Easier to defend. Would save lives. But the order says no withdrawal without explicit permission. The order is absolute. Denied. Ninth Army will counterattack. Restore the line. No withdrawal. The chief of staff hesitates. Sir. The counterattack will cost significant casualties. The secondary positions. I know what the secondary positions offer. I also know what the order requires. Denied. No withdrawal. The chief of staff leaves. Von Brenner sits alone with the decision. He's 61 years old. Fought in the First War. Commanded corps. Armies. Army groups. 40 years guided by a code that valued sound judgment. Honest counsel. And protecting the men under his command. Now he's ordering men to die attacking when withdrawing would save them. Because the order demands it. Because soldiers execute orders even when those orders kill unnecessarily. The telephone rings. Kohler. Wilhelm. I'm calling to inform you the Chancellor has decided to make a change in Army Group Center Command. Von Brenner already knows. Has known since the standfast order was issued. Officers who question orders don't survive in this new system. Effective when? Tomorrow. Health reasons. Officially, you'll be credited with bringing the Army Group to Moscow's gates. Retirement with honor. Health reasons. The fiction everyone maintains. Better than admitting political leadership no longer tolerates military judgment. I understand. Who replaces me? Von Klug. He has assured the Chancellor he will execute all orders without question. Without question. That's the new qualification. Not competence. Not experience. Not judgment. Unquestioning obedience. Von Brenner feels 40 years of tradition dying in this moment. The culture that valued truth, that rewarded honest counsel, that trusted officers to use judgment in executing mission-type orders, dying because political will demand certainty, and judgment offers only probabilities. I'll prepare the change of command. He hangs up, opens his personal papers, begins drafting the farewell order to his troops. Not bitter. That wouldn't be right. Just dignified acknowledgement of service ending. But he writes one letter. Private to Kohler. Hand delivery only. Friedrich, we executed the stand-fast order skillfully despite our doubts. It worked in the immediate sense. The line held, but in executing orders we believed questionable. We gave those orders credibility our reputations provided. If we had resigned in protest, the order would have had less legitimacy. Our competence served decisions we opposed. Future historians will note we stayed. We executed. We made it work. They may not understand that our skill enabled the very policies we argued against. This troubles me more than losing my command. We were complicit through our competence. Remember this. He seals it, gives it to his personal aide with instructions for immediate hand delivery to Kohler. Then he sits at his desk, looks at the maps one last time. Army Group Center. Closest approach to Moscow. 20 kilometers within artillery range of the Kremlin. They came so close. And now it ends not in battle, but in relief of command for asking if there might be a better way. The tradition doesn't go out with glory. It goes out with a polite fiction about health reasons. Christmas Day, 1941. The temperature has stabilized at minus 42 degrees. The front has stabilized into grinding attrition. Soviet attacks continue. German forces hold at catastrophic cost. Steiner receives the telephone call on Christmas morning. No warning, just notification. General Steiner, you are hereby relieved of command of 2nd Panzer Army, effective immediately. You will report to Berlin for reassignment. General Schmidt will assume command. He has been briefed on your current dispositions. Steiner doesn't ask why. He knows why he requested withdrawal, argued for it, continued to argue even after the order was given, executed it skillfully. Yes, but made his disagreement known. That's no longer acceptable. I understand. I'll brief General Schmidt immediately. That won't be necessary. He's already en route to your headquarters. You're to depart within 6 hours. Relieved without even the courtesy of briefing his replacement, the message is clear. Disagreement isn't just discouraged, it's punished. Quickly, publicly, Steiner hangs up, looks around his headquarters. The schoolhouse that's been command post for 6 months. Maps covering the walls, charts showing dispositions. Supply status. Casualty reports, 2nd Panzer Army. His command, the formation that raced across France in 1940, that drove deep into Soviet Union in 1941, that came within sight of Moscow, now being given to an officer whose primary qualification is he won't question orders. Steiner's aide enters. Young captain. Good officer. Sir, I heard. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew this was coming. Probably knew it the moment I wrote the first withdrawal request. You did your duty. Sir. Gave honest military assessment. Yes. And learned that honest assessment is no longer valued when it contradicts political will. Remember that, Captain, in the new system, questioning orders equals disloyalty. Judgment equals insubordination. Competence matters only if it serves unquestioning obedience. The aide says nothing. What is there to say? Steiner begins gathering his personal items. Not much. Field commanders travel light. Papers. Maps. Personal journal. Photographs of his wife and children. The children's photographs make him pause. He hasn't seen them in 18 months. Wrote them letters explaining he was fighting for their future. Believed it when he wrote it. Now he's not sure what he was fighting for. Just knows he did it skillfully. Executed orders he thought were wrong because that's what soldiers do. And that execution enabled catastrophe. General Schmidt arrives within 4 hours. Younger, eager, committed. Steiner briefs him thoroughly. Current disposition. Soviet pressure points. Supply status. Casualty projections. The key thing, Steiner says, is flexibility. The Soviets will probe, find weak points. You'll need to adjust, reinforce, sometimes give ground to save forces for counterattack. Schmidt looks uncomfortable. Sir, I've been instructed that no ground is to be given. Stand fast means stand fast, even when standing costs more than adjusting. Those are my orders. Sir, Steiner nods. Understands. Schmidt isn't incompetent. Schmidt is obedient. That's the qualification now. Then I wish you luck. General, the men are good. They'll hold as long as humans can hold. Just remember they're humans, not machines. I'll remember. Sir. But Steiner doubts he will. Schmidt will remember his orders, follow them precisely. Execute without question, and men will die who didn't have to. Steiner leaves the headquarters. The staff assembles to see him off. They salute. He returns the salute, gets in the staff car, drives west through the frozen landscape, past columns of frostbite casualties heading to the rear, past fresh troops heading forward to replace the frozen dead. past the long lines of frozen horses lining the roads. This is what standfast looks like on the ground. This is what political will costs when it overrides military judgment. And he helped executed the order skillfully, made it work as well as it could work. Technical competence serving catastrophe. The car drives through Christmas Day. No celebration. No peace on earth. Just frozen soldiers dying in place because orders said stand fast. Kohler receives von Brenner's letter that evening. Reads it twice. The old field marshal's words hitting like physical blows. Our competence served decisions we opposed. We were complicit through our competence. Kohler sits at his desk, the letter in one hand, his diary in the other. Von Brenner is right. By executing the standfast order skillfully, by making it work. They validated it, proved it could be done. Their technical excellence became the Chancellor's vindication. If they'd refused, if they'd resigned, the order might have failed. And failure might have taught caution. But they executed, and it worked. And success justified the approach. Kohler writes in his diary, not the usual measured assessment, something more raw. December 25th, received von Brenner's letter. He's right. We stayed to mitigate damage. Instead, we enabled damage by making it survivable. Our skill made bad strategy workable. This is the trap. When you execute doubtful orders successfully, you validate those orders, make future doubtful orders more likely. We are complicit. He closes the diary. But the thought doesn't leave. Professional competence without moral courage serves any master, even the wrong one. December 30th. The reports continue accumulating. Casualties, equipment losses, unit strengths degrading daily. But the line holds. The Soviets are pushing. The Germans are bending. But the line holds. In narrow military terms, the standfast order is working. The front hasn't collapsed. No rout. No repetition of Napoleon's disaster. The Chancellor was right. German discipline can hold impossible positions. But Kohler understands something the Chancellor doesn't care about. Holding impossible positions costs more than losing them quickly. The slow bleeding exhausts armies more thoroughly than catastrophic defeat, because catastrophic defeat ends. Slow bleeding continues. December casualties will exceed 100,000. January will be worse. February worse still. They're winning by not losing, surviving by not collapsing, holding by not retreating. But survival isn't victory. And holding isn't advancing. The telephone rings. Intelligence report. Japanese have attacked American naval base at Pearl Harbor. United States entering the war. Kohler processes this. Germany now fighting Soviet Union in the east. Britain in the west. Soon America joining Britain. Three-front war. The nightmare scenario every German staff officer was trained to avoid, and the standfast order guaranteed it. By holding at Moscow. By not retreating. They've demonstrated the war will continue. The quick victory is impossible. The long war is inevitable. In trying to avoid defeat, they've guaranteed they can't win. Kohler doesn't write this in his official reports. Writes it only in his diary. December 30th. Standfast order holding line. Preventing collapse. But preventing collapse isn't achieving victory. We've traded quick defeat for slow exhaustion. Held Moscow but lost strategic initiative. The math is simple. We're fighting world. World has more men, more resources, more time. We have discipline and determination. Not enough. He closes the diary, returns to the casualty reports. Understanding no longer guides decisions. That's the new reality. Excellence exists to serve political will, not to shape it. The Prussian tradition is dead. Died in December 1941. In the frozen ground outside Moscow. Died with dignity. Following orders. But dead nonetheless. January 15th. 942. The Soviet offensive is slowing. Not stopping. Slowing. Soviet logistics are stretched. Winter affects them too. Their advance is outrunning supply lines. Volkonsky recognizes this. Capable soldier understanding operational limitations. He wanted to push to Smolensk. Can't. Supply won't support it. Time to consolidate. His assessment reaches Kohler through intelligence channels. German intercepts of Soviet communications. Volkonsky to his staff. We've pushed them back 50 to 200 kilometers depending on sector. Achieved operational objectives. Saved Moscow. Degraded German combat power. But we can't achieve decisive victory. Their discipline too strong. They're holding despite conditions that should break any army. Consolidate. Prepare for spring. Kohler reads this with respect. Volkonsky is capable, understood German weakness, exploited it, but also understood his own limitations. Didn't overreach. Soldier fighting soldier. both serving political masters who care more about will than wisdom. The irony isn't lost on Kohler. German and Soviet officers would probably agree on optimal operations if left to pure military judgment. But both are subordinate to political leadership that values ideology over expertise. The difference is Stalin learned to listen to his officers. Eventually, after catastrophic losses taught him he needed them. The German chancellor learned the opposite lesson. That overruling officers can work, that will can overcome expert doubt. One side learning experts are necessary, other side learning experts are optional. That's the difference that will determine outcomes. But that's years away. In January 1942, Kohler only knows the immediate crisis is passing. The line held, the army survived. The standfast order worked. In narrow sense, February 1st, assessment meeting. The chancellor summons senior staff for strategic review. Present. Kohler, the officers who replaced the relieved commanders. Intelligence chiefs, the chancellor begins. Gentlemen, we have survived the Soviet winter offensive. Our forces held despite conditions no army in history has endured. This validates the standfast order. Military judgment said we should retreat. I ordered us to hold. We held, therefore my judgment was correct. No one responds immediately. The logic is simple. The conclusion is right in immediate tactical sense, but Kohler knows the deeper truth. They survived December. At cost that will be paid for years. Still, courtesy requires acknowledgement. The line held. The army remains intact. That is accurate assessment. More than intact. Proven. German discipline overcame Soviet numbers and Russian winter. This proves we'll defeat circumstances. That's the lesson. We apply this going forward. There it is. The lesson the chancellor learned. Standfast worked once. Therefore, standfast works always. Emergency measure becoming permanent doctrine. Kohler wants to explain that specific circumstances made December unique. That generalizing from one success is dangerous. That sound judgment should evaluate each situation independently. But he's watched what happens to officers who argue, von Brenner relieved, Steiner relieved, others relieved, all capable soldiers, all replaced by officers whose primary qualification is unquestioning obedience. Kohler is one of the last experts in senior position, if he's relieved, who remains to provide any restraint at all. So he stays silent, complicit through silence, enabling through not opposing, choosing survival over integrity. The meeting continues, planning for spring, summer offensive, objectives, resources. But Kohler barely listens. He's thinking about his letter from von Brenner, about competence serving wrong decisions, about staying versus resigning. He stayed, executed the order skillfully, made it work as well as it could work, and by making it work, he proved it could work, validated the method, legitimized the approach. His skill became the chancellor's vindication. That's the trap. When you execute doubtful orders successfully, you validate those orders, make future doubtful orders more likely. If they'd failed, the chancellor might have learned caution, but they succeeded, so he learned confidence, excellence teaching the wrong lessons. Kohler leaves the meeting, returns to his office, opens his diary. February 1st. Standfast order declared success. Will become permanent doctrine. My execution of order I doubted has validated approach I opposed. This is outcome of staying versus resigning. Stayed to mitigate damage, instead enabled damage by making bad orders work. Von Brenner was right. Our competence serves catastrophe. We are complicit. He closes the diary, looks at the calendar. February 1942. War started June 1941. 8 months ago, they invaded Soviet Union expecting quick victory. Now they're frozen in Russia, fighting Britain in the West. Soon fighting America too. The quick victory is impossible. The long war is inevitable. The mathematics are simple. They're outnumbered, out-resourced, out-timed. Analysis says they'll lose eventually. Not quickly, but inevitably. But analysis no longer guides strategy. Political will does, and political will believes determination overcomes mathematics. Kohler knows how this ends. Knows it with certainty. Knows they'll fight brilliantly. Discipline will hold. Soldiers will perform magnificently. And they'll lose anyway, because will doesn't overcome mathematics indefinitely. But he can't say this. Can't argue this. Can't even write it in official reports. Can only execute skillfully, competently, serving catastrophe with skill. That's what soldiers do in the new system. They salute and execute, even when they know better, especially when they know better. because their competence is needed to make the impossible last as long as possible. Kohler returns to his work, processing reports, updating assessments, planning operations, doing his job, enabling catastrophe. The temperature outside remains minus 40 degrees. The standfast order remains in effect. The Prussian tradition of honest counsel serving sound judgment is dead. Long live the new tradition, unquestioning obedience serving political will. It will take 3.5 more years to fully pay the price for December 1941. But the bill is already written. Soldiers are just executing the payment schedule. Competently, skillfully, all the way to ruins. Summer 42. Planning for renewed offensive. The Wehrmacht has recovered partially. Not fully, never fully after December, but enough to contemplate offensive operations. The strategic debate focuses on objectives. Kohler and the staff recommend limited operations. Secure southern flank. Capture Caucasus oil fields. Strategic targets that improve Germany's resource position. The Chancellor wants Stalingrad, not for military value, for symbolic significance, city bearing Stalin's name. Psychological victory. Political trophy? Assessment is clear. Stalingrad is a diversion from the primary objective. Caucasus oil matters. Stalingrad matters only to Stalin's pride and the Chancellor's ego. But assessment doesn't guide decisions anymore. The Chancellor overrides the staff. Stalingrad becomes objective. Not supporting primary objective. Kohler writes the operational orders, clear directives, implementable plans, makes the doubtful decision executable. Again, September 1942. Stalingrad, the city is rubble. Block by block fighting. The Wehrmacht is grinding forward. Slowly, at catastrophic cost. Urban combat in a city the Soviets won't abandon. Assessment from field commanders is unanimous. This is a meat grinder. German losses are unsustainable. The city has no strategic value. Even if captured, holding it through winter will be impossible. Request permission to bypass. Leave holding force. Continue toward the actual objective. Caucasus oil. The Chancellor refuses. Stalingrad must be taken completely. No compromise. Not because it matters militarily, because it matters symbolically. Kohler presents the field commander's assessments. His responsibility, honest counsel. The Chancellor's response references December 1941. Officers said we should retreat from Moscow. I ordered stand fast. We held. You were wrong. I was right. Same situation now. Officers doubt. I'm certain Stalingrad will be taken. Kohler tries to explain the difference. December was defensive. Stalingrad is offensive. December had continuous front. Stalingrad is exposed salient. Different circumstances require different approaches. The Chancellor isn't interested in nuanced analysis. Principles don't change with circumstances. Will overcame winter at Moscow. Will captures Stalingrad now. That's the lesson December taught. Wrong lesson. Completely wrong lesson. But Kohler can't say this directly. Can only present the assessment. Let the Chancellor decide. The Chancellor decides. Stalingrad attack continues. Kohler returns to his office. The pattern is clear now. December 1941 became template. Single success generalized into universal principle. Emergency measure applied to every situation. Military judgment evaluating each situation on specific circumstances is dismissed as overcomplexity. The Chancellor has found his formula. Stand fast worked, therefore commitment always works. Attack with determination always succeeds. Except it doesn't. September 24th. The confrontation, the relationship between Kohler and the Chancellor has been deteriorating for months. The accumulated disagreements, the assessments contradicting political certainty, the pattern of being overruled. Today it breaks. Kohler presents the latest assessment from Stalingrad. Soviet forces massing north and south of the city. Classic envelopment position. Sixth Army is an exposed salient, vulnerable to being cut off. Recommendation. Withdraw now, before encirclement closes. Save the army. The Chancellor studies the maps, then looks at Kohler with something between pity and contempt. You're always recommending withdrawal. Moscow. You wanted retreat. I ordered stand fast. We won. Now Stalingrad. You want retreat. I order continue attack. We'll win again. Circumstances are different. Circumstances are always different. That's the excuse always made. I see the pattern. December taught the lesson. Will defeats circumstances. Stand fast worked. It works because I understand something you don't. Psychology matters more than logistics. Determination matters more than calculations. Kohler maintains composure. 4 decades of discipline. But underneath, frustration building. I'm providing military assessment. That's my duty. Whether you accept it is your decision. But history will judge whether I provided honest counsel or just told you what you wanted to hear. Wrong thing to say. The Chancellor's face darkens. History will judge results, not intentions. December 1941. I got results. You got doubts? I'll take my results over your doubts every time. Sir, I respectfully disagree with the Stalingrad strategy, but I'll execute your orders. That's always been the case. No, you'll execute with constant opposition. Constant doubt. Constant undermining. I need staff who believe in victory, not those who calculate defeat. Silence. Then the Chancellor speaks quietly, dangerously quiet. General Kohler, you are hereby relieved as Chief of the General Staff, effective immediately. I thank you for your service. You may retire with honor, but your services are no longer required. Kohler stands. Salutes. I understand. Sir, do you understand that your judgment, your careful calculations, your systematic analysis, all of it missed the essential truth? That what matters more than numbers. That determination overcomes odds. That Germany wins because Germans don't quit. I understand you believe that. Sir, I don't believe it. I know it. December proved it. You'll see. When Stalingrad falls, you'll see. When we win this war, you'll see your doubt was the problem, not the solution. Kohler salutes again, leaves the office, 40 years of military service ending in dismissal for providing honest assessment. He walks through the Wolf's Lair headquarters, past staff officers who avert their eyes. They know. Everyone knows. Question the Chancellor's judgment. Lose your position. The message is clear. Assessment is welcome only when it agrees with political will. Otherwise, it's defeatism, disloyalty, grounds for dismissal. Kohler reaches his quarters, packs his belongings, the leather diary, 40 years of service condensed into one bag. He writes final entry as Chief of Staff. September 24th, 942. Relieved for opposing Stalingrad strategy. Expected this. The pattern established December 1941 reaches logical conclusion. Judgment subordinated completely to political will. I stayed thinking I could provide restraining influence. Instead, I provided competence that made bad strategy executable. Would have been more honorable to resign December 1941, but I stayed. Executed. Enabled. History will judge whether that was right. He closes the diary, leaves the headquarters. Within 4 months, 6th Army will be encircled at Stalingrad, ordered to stand fast, to hold despite being surrounded. December 1941, logic applied to completely different circumstances. 91,000 Germans will march into Soviet captivity. February about 1943. The catastrophe Kohler predicted. That assessment foresaw. That honest counsel warned against. But assessment doesn't guide strategy anymore. Political will does, and political will believes. December 1941 proved. Stand fast always works. July 1943. Kursk. Steiner was recalled in February. Not as field commander. As Inspector General of Panzer Forces. Desk job. Safe job. Job that keeps expertise available without giving it decision authority. He's watching preparations for Operation Citadel. The Kursk offensive, largest armor engagement in history. Assessment is concerning. Soviets know the attack is coming, have prepared defenses in depth, multiple fortified lines, minefields, artillery concentrations, tank reserves. Attacking into prepared defenses violates basic armor doctrine. Panzers excel at exploitation. Maneuver. Breakthrough into open terrain. Not frontal assault against fortified positions. Steiner recommends alternative. Mobile defense. Let Soviets attack. Counterattack their penetrations. Use armor for what it's designed for. Maneuver. Not battering ram. The recommendation reaches the Chancellor. His response is predictable. General Steiner, in December 1941, you recommended retreat from Moscow. I ordered stand fast. The army held. I was right. You were wrong. Now you recommend defensive operations at Kursk. I order offensive. I'll be right again. Steiner tries to explain. December was defensive posture. Kursk is offensive. Different operations require different approaches. December's stand fast doesn't apply to offensive operations. The Chancellor isn't interested in distinctions. The principle is universal. Determination overcomes obstacles. Will defeats circumstances. Attack with sufficient determination succeeds. That's what December taught. Steiner sees the pattern clearly now. December 1941 became template. Single success generalized into universal principle. Emergency measure applied to every situation. Judgment evaluating each situation on specific circumstances is dismissed as overcomplexity. The Chancellor has found his formula. Stand fast worked, therefore commitment always works. Attack with determination always succeeds. Except it doesn't. Kursk offensive launches July 5th. Within a week, it's clear the attack is failing. Soviet defense is too strong. German loss is catastrophic. Assessment, halt offensive. Withdraw to starting position. Preserve armor for defensive operations. The Chancellor orders continue attack. More determination. More will. Success is just ahead. The attack continues. The losses mount. German armored strength, carefully rebuilt after December 1941, is being shattered against prepared defenses. Finally, after 2 weeks, the offensive is called off. Not because the Chancellor accepts judgment, because even he can see it's not working. But the order isn't withdraw. The order is stand fast, hold ground gained, defend in place. December 1941 formula applied again, to different circumstances, with different results. Soviet counteroffensive begins. Germans, exhausted from attacking, now must defend without mobile reserves, without the armor that was destroyed attacking fortified positions. The line bends, the line breaks. The Germans retreat. Not ordered withdrawal. Chaotic falling back? Exactly what Standfast was supposed to prevent. Steiner watches from his desk in Berlin, reads the reports, understands what happened. December 1941 worked because defensive operation matched circumstances. Hold frozen positions when both sides exhausted. Soviets couldn't push much further. Germans couldn't retreat safely. Stand fast made sense that specific time and place, but universally applied to offensive at Kursk, it destroyed the offensive capability. Consumed reserves attacking when mobile defense would have preserved them. One success applied everywhere. Failing everywhere except that one time, 1944. Multiple fronts. The war has expanded beyond anyone's capacity to manage. Eastern Front collapsing slowly. Western Front now open Normandy invasion. Southern Front Italy. The three-front nightmare. At every crisis point, the response is the same. Stand fast. Hold ground. No withdrawal. December 1941 formula. Normandy. Panzer divisions held inland, not positioned to counterattack beaches. Why? Stand fast orders. Hold assigned positions. Don't maneuver. When invasion comes, panzers can't reach beaches quickly. By the time they're released for counterattack, allies are established. Assessment. Mobile defense would have worked better. Keep panzers mobile. Concentrated, ready to counterattack wherever invasion hits. Rejected. Stand fast means stay in position. Don't maneuver. Defense is about holding ground, not about mobility. December 1941 formula applied to completely different circumstance. Result. Normandy succeeds. Allies establish beachhead. Western Front becomes active theater. Eastern Front. Soviet summer offensive. Operation Bagration. Massive breakthrough. Army Group Center surrounded in multiple pockets. Assessment. Withdraw while still possible. Save the armies. Order. Stand fast. Hold the pockets. Relief will come. Relief doesn't come. The pockets are destroyed. Army Group Center ceases to exist as effective fighting force. 28 divisions eliminated. 400,000 casualties. December 1941 formula applied again. To offensive situation. With encircled forces, results catastrophic. But the formula persists because it worked once. In specific circumstances, in December 1941, that one success justifies infinite repetitions. Even when each repetition fails. April 1945. The bunker, Berlin is burning. Soviet armies closing from east. Western allies closing from west. The Reich is weeks from complete collapse. In the Führer bunker, the Chancellor still issues orders, still moves pins on maps, still commands armies that no longer exist, and still applies December 1941 logic. Stand fast, hold Berlin, no retreat. Will defeat circumstances. Determination overcomes odds. The staff officers in the bunker exchange glances. Everyone knows the war is lost. Everyone knows stand fast in Berlin is suicide. Everyone knows the orders are insane. But nobody says it. The culture established December 1941 question orders. Lose position persists to the end. Officers execute impossible orders because that's what officers do. One young colonel, new to staff, finally asked the question, Mein Führer, the situation is hopeless. Shouldn't we consider? The Chancellor cuts him off. December 1941. Moscow. Situation was hopeless. Officers wanted retreat. I ordered stand fast. We held. We won. Same now. Berlin will be held. Germany will prevail. That's not optimism. That's certainty based on proven formula. The colonel says nothing more. Learns the lesson all learned. Don't question. Just execute. The orders go out. Berlin will be defended to the last man. Stand fast. The formula that worked in December 1941 applied one final time. The result is predictable. Berlin falls. The Reich ends. Unconditional surrender. Stand fast. Applied to the final hopeless situation. Accomplishes nothing except prolonging agony. But the Chancellor never learns this. Dies in the bunker. Convinced to the end that December 1941 proved will overcomes everything. That stand fast was vindicated. That officers were always wrong and he was always right. He has evidence. December 1941. One success. Applied universally. Failing everywhere except that one time. But that one success was enough. To build a doctrine. To override judgment. To subordinate military expertise to political conviction. One success leading to countless failures. The final irony. 9:55. The lecture hall. Full circle. Kohler finishes his account. The young officer candidates have been silent throughout, listening to the old general describe how military culture died in December 1941. One student raises his hand, speaks carefully. Sir, you're saying the stand fast order was wrong. Kohler considers the question. 40 years of training in his answer. No, I'm saying the stand fast order was right for December 1941. Specifically, uniquely, given those precise circumstances, exhausted armies, frozen positions, both sides at operational limits. In that context, standing fast prevented collapse while not costing more than withdrawal would have. He pauses, lets them absorb this. But that success created a template. Emergency measure became universal doctrine. Specific solution became general principle. What worked once was applied everywhere. Different circumstances. Same formula. And the formula failed. Repeatedly, because circumstances weren't the same. Another student, then why did it continue? If it kept failing, because the one success validated the approach, December 1941 proved stand fast could work. Therefore, it must work always. Sound judgment says evaluate each situation independently. Political conviction says apply proven formula universally. Which one guided strategy? You know the answer? A different student. Sir, you stayed in service. Executed orders you disagreed with. Should you have resigned instead? The question Kohler has asked himself for 13 years. The dilemma, if I resigned, someone more obedient replaces me. Less restraint on bad decisions. If I stay, I execute bad decisions skillfully. Make them work as well as they can work. By making them work, I validate them. Prove they're executable. Enable future bad decisions. Silence in the hall. Von Brenner understood this. Wrote me in December 1941. Said our competence was enabling policies we opposed. He was right. We stayed, we executed, we made stand fast work, and in working, it justified itself. Our skill became complicity. One student, older than the others, speaks, Sir, what should we learn from this? Kohler looks at him directly. That competence without moral courage serves any master, even the wrong one. That executing orders skillfully isn't the same as executing right orders. That staying to provide restraining influence can become enabling catastrophe. He picks up his old diary, holds it up. December 1941. I wrote this, we'll execute orders despite disagreement. That's what we do. I believed it, followed it, and it led to complicity and disaster. He sets down the diary. The lesson isn't that soldiers should disobey orders. The lesson is that judgment matters, should guide strategy. When judgment is consistently overruled by political conviction, catastrophe follows, not immediately. Eventually, December 1941 worked. Stalingrad failed. Kursk failed. Normandy failed. Berlin failed. Same formula. One success, countless failures. Another pause. Your generation will face this dilemma. Orders you doubt, strategies you oppose. The code says execute. But at what point does execution become complicity? I don't have the answer. I made my choice. Stayed. Executed. Enabled. You'll make yours. The lecture ends. Students file out quietly. Thinking. Kohler remains at the lectern. Looking at faces not yet marked by impossible choices. Not yet scarred by serving catastrophe with competence. He envies them and pities them because they'll face the same dilemma. In different form, Different circumstances, but same essential choice. Serve skillfully even when orders are wrong, or resign in protest even when that abandons the soldiers who must execute. Kohler chose service. It led to complicity. But would resignation have prevented anything, or just removed restraining influence? He still doesn't know. 1960. International Military History Conference. 5 years after the lecture, Kohler is 76 now. Still writing, still analyzing, still trying to understand what happened and whether anything could have been different. The conference brings together military historians from multiple countries, including Soviet Union. Cold War politics make this rare, but military skill transcends politics. Sometimes, Kohler finds himself at coffee with a Soviet officer, Marshal Mikhail Volkonsky, now 64, gray uniform with medals, hero of the Soviet Union, multiple orders of Lenin. They recognize each other from intelligence files and post-war studies. Never met during the war, but each knows the other's decisions. They sit, conversation through interpreter. Soldiers discussing matters of their profession. Marshal Volkonsky, I've studied your December 1941 offensive. Skillfully executed, you husbanded reserves while we exhausted ourselves. Waited for the culminating point, then struck. Classic operational art. Volkonsky nods. General Kohler, I studied your standfast order. Remarkable discipline. Any other army would have collapsed. German discipline held impossible positions. I was impressed even while fighting against it. They sip coffee. Two old soldiers discussing the war that defined their lives. Your government learned to listen to military judgment. Kohler says quietly. Eventually, after initial disasters, Stalin learned his limitations. Volkonsky agrees. After catastrophic losses, he understood he needed us. Let us fight the war while he handled politics. Painful lesson. But ours learned the opposite lesson, that overruling us could succeed. December 1941 proved it. Applied that lesson repeatedly. Volkonsky nods. We noticed December 1941. Stand fast made sense. Tactical necessity. But Stalingrad, ordering 6th Army hold surrounded positions. That made no military sense. We exploited it. Sound judgment said withdraw. Political will said stand fast. December formula applied to different circumstances. And you stayed in service, executed those orders, made them work as well as they could work. Kohler is silent for a moment. Then, yes, duty demanded execution. But execution validated bad strategy, made it seem workable, enabled repetition. Volkonsky considers this the burden we served, even when service enables disaster. I understand Stalin's purges killed my friends. My colleagues, I stayed, survived, served. Was I complicit? Or was I doing duty? They look at each other, two who faced impossible choices. Made different decisions. Both served catastrophic systems. Both tried to do their duty. Perhaps, Kohler says slowly, the lesson is that competence needs moral courage. Technical skill isn't enough. Must also have courage to resign when service enables disaster. Perhaps, Volkonsky replies, or perhaps resignation simply removes restraining influence, allows worse outcomes. No clear answer. They sit in silence, coffee growing cold. Finally, Volkonsky speaks, I respect you. General Kohler, you did your duty as you understood it. We were enemies, but both soldiers of our profession. That matters. Kohler nods. Marshal Volkonsky, the same. You fought well. Skillfully, we lost. You won. But as soldiers, mutual respect, they shake hands. Former enemies, both carrying weight of decisions made under impossible circumstances, both wondering if different choices would have mattered, neither knowing the answer. The handshake lingers a moment. Then they part. Two old soldiers, two different nations, two different outcomes. But the same question haunting both. When does duty become complicity? When does competence enable catastrophe? When does staying to help become staying to harm? Neither knows. Perhaps no one can know. Perhaps that's the real legacy of December 1941. Not the battles, not the casualties, not the strategic consequences. The legacy is this question. The question that haunts every soldier who serves under questionable leadership. The question that has no answer. Only choices and consequences, and the weight of both carried until the end. Kohler walks away from the conference, 76 years old, 40 years of service behind him. The question still ahead. The temperature outside is mild. Spring evening in Europe. Not like December 1941. Not minus 40 degrees. Not frozen soldiers dying in place. Just comfortable retirement. For a soldier who served catastrophe with skill, the question remains, should he have been less skillful and more courageous? Should he have executed less ably and resigned more bravely? Should he have been a worse soldier and a better man? He doesn't know, can never know, can only live with the choices made. The orders executed, the catastrophe-enabled soldier, service, consequence. The lights of the conference hall fade behind him. The old general walks into the evening, carrying December 1941, carrying the question, carrying the weight until the end.